Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to tackle complex legal stuff and, well, make it make sense for you.
And today, we're diving into something pretty heavy. Divorce law. Specifically, what happens when a marriage ends, assets are shared, but one person has acted, well, pretty badly.
Exactly. We're talking serious misconduct, financial lies, the whole 9 yards.
It's about more than just splitting things down the middle. In many places, there's this idea of community of property, right? Assets acquired during marriage belong to both.
Usually means a 50-50 split when things end.
But sometimes, that 50-50 split would be fundamentally unfair because of one spouse's actions. The law has ways to deal with that.
And that mechanism is our focus today. Forfeiture of patrimonial benefits. Sounds technical, but it's crucial.
It really is.
We're going deep into a specific case, S.B.K v. P.T.K. It's a striking example of how deceit, hiding assets, both during the marriage and later in court, can lead to someone losing their entire share. Okay, let's unpack this.
Our goal is to show you how the legal arguments and, crucially, the evidence led to this forfeiture order, all based on South Africa's specific divorce laws.
So where do we start, legally speaking? What's the anchor?
The anchor is Section 9(1) of the Divorce Act 70 of 1979. That's the piece of legislation that gives the court the power to order forfeiture.
Okay, Section 9(1). And for listeners maybe not familiar with this specific law, what does it actually tell a judge to look at? How do they decide not to do the standard 50-50 split?
Well, it sets out three main things to consider. First, how long the marriage lasted. Second, the circumstances that caused the marriage to break down. And third, any substantial misconduct by either party.
Substantial misconduct? That sounds like a high bar.
It is. The ultimate question for the court is, if we just split everything equally, would one spouse get an undue benefit given these three factors?
Undue benefit. So the law recognizes that equal isn't always equitable.
Precisely. That's the core idea. Sometimes fairness demands a different outcome than just simple division.
Right. That distinction is key. Okay. Let's get into the details of S.B.K v. P.T.K. What's the backstory? It was a long marriage, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. They got married back in 1995, so we're talking over 20 years together before things really fell apart around 2017.
And the actual divorce proceedings, including this forfeiture claim, started when?
The plaintiff filed in 2019. And here's an interesting point from the source material.
Oh.
She initially asked for partial forfeiture.
A partial. Okay, what does that suggest?
It suggests that, at the very start, she might not have known the full picture. Maybe she knew things were bad, knew there was financial neglect, but perhaps the scale of the deceit, the hidden assets, only really surfaced later.
Ah, so the legal process itself, maybe the discovery phase, uncovered more. Here's where it gets really interesting.
That seems likely. It often happens that way. You start digging, requesting documents, and suddenly the picture changes dramatically.
So what were the initial allegations? We mentioned misconduct, but what specifically?
They were serious. The plaintiff described significant emotional strife, psychological abuse, emotional abuse. But the real kicker, especially for the forfeiture claim, was the financial abuse.
Financial abuse? How did that manifest? What was the claim?
The core claim was that she consistently paid for household expenses, the kids' needs, everything, while the defendant claimed he just couldn't contribute. Financial incapacity, he said.
He just didn't have the money, supposedly.
Right. And according to her claim, this went on for years, putting an immense financial and emotional strain on her, all based on this alleged inability to help.
But claims are one thing. The court needed proof, right? Especially for something like substantial misconduct.
Absolutely. And this is where the case stands out. The plaintiff didn't just make claims, she backed them up extensively.
With what kind of evidence?
Financial statements, tax records. Basically, documentary proof that painted a picture contradicting his claims of incapacity. It showed a pattern.
Even with proof, 22 years is a long time. Doesn't the length of the marriage usually weigh heavily against forfeiture? How did the court balance that?
That's a really good point. Section 9(1) explicitly mentions duration. But the court essentially said, look, duration matters, but it doesn't automatically shield someone from the consequences of persistent, serious misconduct.
So the nature of the misconduct can override the length.
Yes, especially when it's about ongoing deception and financial exploitation that fundamentally undermines the partnership. It wasn't just one bad act. It was alleged to be a pattern throughout the marriage, making a 50-50 split seem, well, unduly beneficial to him.
Okay, so that covers the misconduct during the marriage. But you mentioned things took a turn during the legal proceedings themselves.
They did. And this is often where these cases are won or lost. The defendant made some critical procedural missteps.
Like what? This is where the legal hammer really dropped, you said.
Precisely. He essentially failed to properly answer the plaintiff's detailed allegations in his court papers. He didn't file an amended plea to counter her claims effectively.
And in legal terms, that's a big deal.
It's huge. It triggered something called deemed admissions.
Deemed admissions. Explain that.
Basically, if the other side makes a specific, factual claim in their formal court documents, and you don't specifically deny it in your response, the court can rule that you've legally admitted it's true. Silence can be taken as agreement in that context.
Wow. So let me get this straight for the listener. It's like getting a formal complaint, say, about your fence being on your neighbor's property with all the details laid out. If you just ignore it, don't formally deny it, the court can just assume you agree your fence is on their property.
That's a great analogy, yes. His failure to properly deny meant many of her serious allegations about the abuse, the deceit. They were taken as established fact by the court. She didn't even have to prove them at trial.
That's incredible. And it ties back to the financial stuff, presumably.
Directly. His whole defense, his whole narrative during the marriage was, I can't contribute, I'm broke.
Yeah.
But the litigation process forces disclosure. You have to show your cards financially.
And his failure to plead properly combined with the need to disclose financials. That was the trap.
Exactly. That long-standing claim of financial incapacity got blown up. It was exposed as, essentially, a fabrication to avoid his responsibilities.
How did they prove it was a fabrication, especially if he was trying to hide things?
This is what's fascinating here, and it's a key lesson. Objective external evidence. The court didn't have to rely on he said, she said.
What kind of evidence?
Third-party documents that he couldn't easily manipulate. We're talking official records from SARS, the South African Revenue Service, tax records.
The tax.
And company records, too. These objective documents directly contradicted his story about having no money.
So his own tax returns, maybe company accounts he was linked to, showed income or assets he claimed not to have. That's the smoking gun.
That's exactly it. When your official tax filings show one thing, you're telling the court another, your credibility is shot. Completely gone.
And this reinforces the importance of following the court's discovery rules, right? You have to be upfront about finances.
Absolutely. The legal principle is crystal clear. Full and frank disclosure is required, especially regarding the joint estate. When you get caught actively deceiving the court, using objective data like tax records, it massively strengthens the argument for substantial misconduct under Section 9(1).
Okay, let's pull this together. The court looks at the long-term financial abuse, the emotional toll, and the deceit during the litigation itself. The plaintiff met her burden of proof.
She did. She successfully showed that given the duration, the breakdown circumstances, and particularly his substantial misconduct, both financial and procedural, allowing him to just walk away with 50% would be an undue benefit.
So what was the final order? What did forfeiture actually mean for him financially?
It was severe. The court ordered him to forfeit his entire 50% share in various specific assets of the joint estate. Not just a bit, the whole half he would normally get.
His entire half. Wow. Can you give an example of what kind of assets he lost out on?
Well, the big one mentioned was his share of the proceeds from selling the matrimonial home, often the most valuable asset a couple owns.
So potentially hundreds of thousands, maybe more, gone.
Quite possibly. It also included shares in investments, other joint property. Considering the 22-year marriage, forfeiting everything is a very significant financial penalty. But the court found it justified.
And the court took one final step to make sure the division happened correctly, didn't they? Something about ensuring he couldn't interfere further.
Yes, that's right. They appointed a receiver, an independent third party.
Why was that significant?
It was a clear signal. Given his history of deception and lack of transparency, the court wasn't taking any chances. The receiver's job was to manage the division of the remaining assets, those not forfeited, fairly, and ensure everything was done by the book, preventing any further attempts by him to hide or manipulate things. It underscores the court's commitment to a truly equitable final outcome.
So what does this all mean? When you boil it down for someone listening, what's the big takeaway from S.B.K v. P.T.K?
Look, it's a powerful illustration of accountability. It shows that financial honesty and transparency within a marriage aren't just moral expectations. They have real, serious legal weight. Betrayal and deceit, especially regarding joint assets, can have devastating financial consequences in a divorce.
And the procedural aspect, too, you can't just ignore the court process.
Absolutely not. His misconduct during the marriage was bad enough, but doubling down with deceit and non-cooperation during the litigation sealed his fate. It led to the harshest possible outcome under Section 9(1).
It really reaffirms that, legally speaking, honesty is the best policy when dealing with shared finances, especially when a relationship breaks down.
Definitely. And if we zoom out, think about the bigger picture. The power of objective, external documentation is immense.
Like those SARS records.
Exactly. And these messy, emotional, high-stakes fights where someone might be trying to lie or hide the ball, those boring official documents, tax filings, bank statements, company records, they become the bedrock of truth.
So, a final thought maybe for someone navigating a difficult separation involving finances.
Yeah, something to really think about is this. Never underestimate the paper trail, especially a paper trail verified by an outside authority like the tax office. It's often the key that unlocks the truth and ultimately exposes fraud, ensuring justice prevails even in the most personal of battles.